which is we have our next two items are significant items, the East Harlem neighborhood rezoning, and then also the thereto project. And after that, we have 7 private applications. So with alacrity, we will now move to the East Harlem neighborhood.
Calvin Brown and Eric Olson will be presenting the pre-hearing for proposed East Harlem neighborhood plan involving zoning map, zoning text, and urban renewal plan amendments, item 5, page 295.
Good afternoon. No pressure to move things along quickly there. As the chair said, my colleagues Calvin and Eric are going to walk through the presentation. I'm Eric Botsford, Deputy Director of the Manhattan office. I'm just going to do a brief introduction of the neighborhood rezoning proposal. We're excited to be back here to present the department's East Harlem rezoning initiative, which is coming back for public hearing on Wednesday. Calvin, our project supervisor for our East Harlem work, and Eric, our project manager, will walk through the bulk of the presentation. We're going to cover a lot of ground, but I want us to be able to take some time to do a few things. First, we want to discuss the extraordinary community planning effort that took place here in East Harlem. We want to talk about the tremendous amount of work the city has done and continues to do here. You heard quite a bit about what HPD and SPS are doing in the neighborhood. Of course, we want to spend some time reminding you of city planning's role and walk you through our zoning proposal. And then we want to talk about what we heard during public review and how we're responding. Before we do that, I want to just reference the incredible Jerome Avenue presentation you heard earlier, because that was the result of a community planning process. That process was a bit different from the community planning process in East Harlem. In Jerome, the city planning spearheaded a community engagement effort. In East Harlem, the local council member, Speaker Mark Viverito, together with the borough president and Community Board 11, convened a steering committee of local stakeholders and community members to develop its own neighborhood plan. A whole host of agencies, including city planning, were invited into that process to attend meetings, observe its deliberations, and discuss how the city could act in the neighborhood. Calvin and Eric will talk more about the product of the incredible work of the steering committee, which was the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, which contained over 200 recommendations. There were a number that were related to zoning and land use, which were delivered to us and served as the basis for our planning work here and our rezoning proposal. I think you'll see from our presentation today that our plan meets the land use objectives of the Speaker's steering committee plan, and that our plan mirrors the community plan in many areas. And in the areas where we do differ, we'll explain why. Just moving really quickly, we talked a lot about the neighborhood, looked at photos back in April when this was certified, but East Harlem is an incredibly varied neighborhood. From 30,000 feet, you can see it. You zoom in a little bit, you see the NYCHA campuses occupying the width of the neighborhood between 112th and 115th, 12 to 15-story buildings there. Lower mid-blocks to the north, and then taller buildings as you approach 125th Street. Zooming in a little closer, you see that a lot of the low buildings on 3rd Avenue, for example, in the center of this picture, are actually underutilized parcels. There are row houses on the mid-blocks, and there are taller buildings in the 30-story range in the neighborhood as well. And then in the back there, you can see the elevated Metro North Viaduct. There are a string of parking lots that front on it. So this is a neighborhood with a lot of great assets. It's diverse and strong community and a proud New York culture, vibrant commercial corridors on 125th, 116th, 3rd Avenue, rich transit access, extensive bus and subway and regional rail that connects East Harlem to the city and to the region as a whole. But it's also a neighborhood with some challenges and some opportunities as well. Calvin and Eric will talk more about these, but we're acting here because this is a neighborhood that deserves attention. It deserves modern zoning that can reflect the strong existing character in the neighborhood and protect these areas. It needs zoning that addresses the challenges, that can generate affordable housing in significant quantities and provide opportunities for job-generating uses. And it requires the full attention of the city to balance growth with preservation and neighborhood services and amenities. Of course, the zoning is just one piece of the puzzle. It's our piece, but it's just one piece. We'll talk more about the other pieces, and you heard about them, but our zoning piece does 5 things here. summed up here. First, it requires affordable housing in all new developments in East Harlem for the very first time through mandatory inclusionary housing. It provides places for East Harlem's businesses to grow and create new jobs. It lays the groundwork for the next phase of the 2nd Avenue subway and its 3 stations that will be located in East Harlem. It finishes the work that was started in our 2003 East Harlem rezoning by protecting mid-blocks in many areas that have a strong existing context. And it does all this with an understanding that East Harlem's buildings and its streets should be safe and should be walkable and should be beautiful. That's our proposal in a nutshell. I'll turn it over to Calvin and Eric now to walk through the proposal in more detail.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you, Eric. So I just want to take a quick snapshot at the district. We heard a lot of this in HPD's presentation, but just to quickly remind the Commission why we're taking action within this neighborhood. East Harlem has a population of over 120,000 people, and as the Commission may recall during the time of certification, there are 46,000 households in this neighborhood that call this area home, and most of them are renters. A large share of the population has incomes at 30% of the area median income or less. And the health impacts in this neighborhood are the greatest among the Manhattan borough, sorry. As HPD stated in their presentation, 75% of the housing stock is affordable through some sort of rent-regulated or government-assisted program, and NYCHA comprises 30% of this housing stock. But most significantly, East Harlem is a neighborhood in transition. And given the current market conditions, and as Eric stated, with the outdated existing zoning, it poses a threat to the existing affordable housing stock as well as the potential for new housing in this neighborhood. So those were the factors that led to us nominating East Harlem as a neighborhood study. And when it was announced by the mayor that East Harlem would be one of the neighborhood studies, the speaker, Melissa Mark-Verito, convened a neighborhood steering committee. She brought together local stakeholders to discuss and debate some of the neighborhood topics and concerns. And out of that came the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. So I just want to take a moment to point out this yellow cover sheet, because a lot of what we'll be discussing today will be referring back to the work that went into this plan, discussing some of the recommendations and the objectives. So whenever this pops up, we're referring to the work that the community did. It's almost like that commercial. There's that news truck again. So we're going to always refer back to the work that they did and then highlight how we responded as a city. So there were a number of meetings that went into the creation of this plan, meeting with local stakeholders, community representatives, that led up to what they call visioning sessions, and then finally steering committee meetings, and then they came up with these objectives under the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. And as you can see by the dates here, these are the various and numerous meetings that city agencies attended with community members to sort of discuss some of the issues and the concerns that were being raised by the community. So as a result, there were 200 recommendations that were included. And as you can see, these are the various topics that were included in the neighborhood plan. So the recommendations fell under these different topics. And as Eric stated earlier, this process sort of differed from our other neighborhood studies, where it was an effort that was led by the community. They invited us in as city agencies to participate in this community-led process, which was very helpful, because through this process we were able to engage with the community and hear directly what these concerns were under these various neighborhood topics. So now we'll talk about our approach. Once this plan was issued, the action that the city took. Once the plan was issued, the engagement didn't stop. A lot of the agencies that were involved in the plan, that went to these meetings, continued to meet with the subgroups to kind of discuss and sort of come up with a plan of action of how the city can take actions for some of the recommendations that were included in the plan. And these are our agency partners that participated in these subgroup meetings and continue to meet with the steering committee once the plan was issued to the city. So the amazing work that went into this plan provided a clear lens for the city to sort of understand the work that we needed to do in Harlem, as well as to sort of identify how we need to use this plan as a guidepost, for how we take action. So in the next couple of slides, I'm gonna walk through the recommendations that were included in the plan and sort of highlight the work that is already underway by some of the agencies as an outcome of this engagement process, this ongoing engagement process that took place. So we'll start with housing, and I won't belabor this. I think HPD did a very good job sort of highlighting the strategies and the approach that they are taking with their housing plan. But this just highlights, once again, this yellow, this is the community plan, the objectives and recommendations they included. And as we can see, a lot of their objectives were focused on preservation, sort of increasing the identifying new tools that the city can take in increasing those efforts for preservation. There were 3 objectives under the affordable housing development, and they basically looked at how can the city reach deeper affordability levels and increase the amount of affordable housing in new developments. So as you can see, HPD's goals that are articulated in their East Harlem housing plan mirrors a lot of the recommendations and objectives included in the neighborhoods plan. HPD, like I stated, did a good job of highlighting their approach and the strategy that they're taking. So I won't spend too much time, but just want to focus on some of the things that we are already doing to really respond to the concerns that were raised in these meetings that we continue to have with the community, especially the new community land trust piloting that HPD is doing, and to take a look at the feasibility of a certificate of no harassment in this targeted area, as well as advancing and prioritizing housing production, affordable housing production, at which a percentage of it will be permanent, and to reach those deeper affordabilities by creating new term sheets and RFP policies that are addressing those concerns. Once again, here we go, referring to the community plan and moving on to health and seniors, and we see that there are 5 objectives that they included, and basically to improve access and health care services to residents of all ages in East Harlem. And one of the actions, that the city has already taken was the Department of Health opened up a new East Harlem Health Action Center, which serves as a multi-service facility for a host of health and social related services. So it's like a one-stop shop for community residents to go to find out about resources in their community, as well as the Department of Health has provided over $200,000 to local organizations to address some of the health-related recommendations that were included in the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. If we take a look at the recommendations the community had for school and education, they were focused on the capacity of the schools in East Harlem and how that capacity can be improved to better serve the the students in East Harlem. So there were 9 recommendations that were included under this topic, and part of that is improving the quality of the schools in East Harlem. And one way is provide air conditioners. In the summertime, especially for the schools along the viaduct, they have to keep the windows closed because they can't hear, and then it's warm. So one of the simplest things we can do is make sure that these schools have air conditioners. And part of that too is increasing the capacity of these schools by opening additional community schools. And these are schools that don't just focus on education, but after hours they open their doors for other community-related needs and resources. So they'll be opening 3 additional schools in East Harlem, as well as providing more Head Start seats for East Harlem toddlers. So moving to open space and recreation, we see that the plan included 5 recommendations, and this is basically focused on improving access to open space. And part of it too is removing the barriers, because there's open space in and surrounding East Harlem, but making sure that individuals in East Harlem know that they can have access to these open space areas. And part of the response from the city already has been engaging the community in the upfront process. So the design process that's a part of the Harlem River Park Greenway, which is creating a linkage between East 125th Street and East 132nd Street, and engaging the community in that process is thinking about how they envision those open space areas. As well as we've heard even in the Jerome Avenue, the Community Park Initiative, making sure that the existing parks are improved and look better for community residents and safe for the young individuals that use those parks within. So parks have 4 capital projects that are been completed or on the way that are located within East Harlem. As well as making sure that in this sort of resiliency era and looking at how they can improve the conditions on the southern portion of the Esplanade is including the community in that sort of process as well. So once this process is kicked off, they want to make sure that the community is involved in this study and in looking at how they can improve the Esplanade waterfront from East 92nd Street to East 154th Street. In terms of transportation, environment, and energy, there were 6 recommendations that were included in the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, and they were focused on pedestrian safety and transportation infrastructure. So one of the projects which was mentioned by our colleagues at SBS is the plaza at East 125th Street. We find this, we know and we continue to harp that this is a very important node for the district and for 125th Street itself, given its regional transportation potential. And we want to make sure that this is a good plaza. This is a plaza that is being used and that people access the plaza because it's safe to get there. So there are improvements that are being made for the connection around this plaza to make sure that it's safe and improving the timing of the signals so it could be accessed and then even access between the Metro North Station and this plaza, as well as improvements along the Park Avenue Viaduct to make sure that it's safe at these various crossings, to make sure that there are curb build-outs and lighting in the tunnel, as well as improving the services along the SBS Select Bus service line. And then the last set of recommendations that we'll go over the small business and workforce. I won't spend that much time because our colleagues at SBS did a great job talking about the work that they're doing in East Harlem. But just want to highlight the East Harlem Commercial District Needs Assessments. We took a look at these commercial corridors within East Harlem, identifying the key issues and the opportunities so that working with the community and working with our interagency partners, we can improve these corridors and make sure that they are, at their full potential, as well as highlighting the Workforce One Center a new Workforce One Center, satellite center that will be located in East Harlem to provide access and information to the jobs that may be available to the residents. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Eric, to talk about our rezoning proposal. And once again, I just want to highlight that at this point, we want to show that we're being responsive to the recommendations, and we want to highlight where we are aligned in terms of the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, and then the other areas where we sort of build off of the recommendations that they included to kind of really take this targeted approach that we're trying to have in East Harlem. So I'll turn it over to Eric now.
Thanks, Calvin. And good afternoon to the Commission. So my colleagues just focused on the many ways in which the city's responding to the recommendations of the community plan. Now we'll focus on land use and zoning in particular. The Speaker's Steering Committee recommendations were really extraordinary. They reflected a detailed and comprehensive look at zoning and land use throughout East Harlem. Our ongoing work and dialogue with the Steering Committee and with the Speaker has helped us tremendously by giving us access to their deep local knowledge and their individual insight into sites and issues within the neighborhood. The Steering Committee's plan listed 3 main objectives with regard to zoning and land use, which can be summarized as preserving areas with consistent neighborhood character, locating increased density in areas that can handle it with the goal of creating new housing and jobs, and leveraging public and private sites in the neighborhood to create community amenities. These are goals that we share with the Speaker's Steering Committee and have worked hard to reflect in our proposal. So in the middle here, you can see the Speaker's Steering Committee's map that they included in their plan, showing their recommended rezoning approach. You can see the preservation areas are marked in yellow, where areas recommended for an upzoning are shown in red. The Steering Committee's plan was very comprehensive, and it reflects an incredible amount of work. It included several maps, helpful graphics, detailed tables, charts, as well as massings that helped illustrate their preferred building forms. So on the bottom right corner, you can see of the slide here, you can see a massing that was included in the community's plan. This shows a massing that they would suggest for Park Avenue with a 10 FAR non-contextual building form featuring commercial food preparation and artist-live workspaces on lower stories adjacent to the rail and residential units above setback from the viaduct. So I want to just give another reminder of our objectives for our rezoning proposal here. As you might notice, these objectives are quite similar to the objectives in the community's plan. We had also a major focus on increasing affordable housing through MIH, creating opportunities for economic development and jobs, and preserving the built context of and character of the neighborhood. So on the left, you can see the map that we just saw from the Steering Committee's plan with the yellow preservation areas and the red upzoning areas. That plan covered a broad geography with 96th Street to the south, 132nd Street to the north, 5th Avenue to the west, and the East River to the east. We took a similar approach when we received the recommendations and began our work. We started with a look at the entire neighborhood, pretty much all of Community District 11, and with the exception of Randall's Island. We conducted several analyses of existing land uses, buildings, and zoning under a variety of scenarios. These rounds of analysis really allowed us to hone in on specific opportunity areas. Many of these areas had a combination of outdated zoning and had also real opportunity for the zoning actions to result in new housing, jobs, and economic development. The result was the map on the right, which shows areas where we proposed changes to the existing zoning. The geography where we're acting is smaller than what was called for in the community's plan, but is the result of an extraordinarily detailed and iterative analysis, really on a lot-by-lot basis. Our zoning recommendations target the areas where zoning will have a meaningful impact on affordable housing production, job-generating uses, and the preservation of built neighborhood character. We think this is a sensitive, balanced, and responsive plan. Just by looking at the map, I think it's clear that we have not employed a broad brush approach here. We've gone block by block, really, to look at existing conditions and develop zoning moves that address our shared objectives with the steering committee in a very fine-grained way. So in the next portion of the presentation, I'll take another look at the city's rezoning proposal and area by area, look at how our proposal relates to the community's recommendations. You'll see that many of our recommendations mirror the Speaker's Steering Committee's plan pretty much exactly. In a few cases, we've built off of those recommendations and, through further analysis, developed slightly different recommendations to ensure that our shared goals are achieved. So let's go ahead and dive in by taking a look at the Park Avenue corridor. Along Park Avenue, we've developed a mixed-use approach that takes advantage of one of the neighborhood's main assets, which is the transit node at 125th and Park, where the Metro North has a station and where the future 2nd Avenue subway terminus will be located. This is an area that could become a major commercial center for Upper Manhattan and for the region as a whole. Our proposal would allow existing businesses to expand and would also permit new job-generating uses to locate near this transit hub. We proposed several higher density districts at 125th Street, radiating to the north and to the south for several blocks. Beyond those points, we proposed lower density districts, both to the north and to the south. There are light manufacturing activities here today, and we believe that these uses should be able to expand. We also believe that new light manufacturing, office, life science, and other commercial uses are particularly appropriate for Park Avenue. We've actually gone a step further here, and in many areas are actually requiring that a portion of new buildings contain these types of uses. The zoning will essentially guarantee that Park Avenue is a truly mixed-use area. Of course, the zoning also permits housing, and as in all areas where we're proposing increased density, the mandatory inclusionary housing program will be mapped here to require permanently affordable housing. Oh, ahead of myself. So on the right here, you can see what types of buildings would result from our rezoning proposal. The base of the building closest to the rail line would contain those commercial or manufacturing uses. Above would be either residential or more commercial use. These buildings would generally be within the 10 to 25 story range, with a couple of larger sites that would go above 30 stories. So now, again, with this yellow plan here, you can see the Speaker's Steering Committee's recommendations for this particular area of the neighborhood for Park Avenue. They recommended zoning to enable a mixed-use corridor for light industrial and commercial uses, especially in the bases of the buildings next to the viaduct. Very familiar refrain here. They recommended higher densities closer to 125th Street with lower densities further away. And if you can see in the red box, it's the same massing that we showed before, but you can see what they would recommend for Park Avenue there, a mixed-use building in the 20-story range with the non-residential base and residential tower above. Clearly, there is a large amount of overlap between these two plans, and while there are some differences in the recommendation in terms of densities for each use, we think our proposal for Park Avenue really translates the spirit and overarching intent of the community's plan. So now we'll move eastward to the Lexington Avenue corridor. Along most of Lexington, we've proposed R7D contextual districts in order to ensure that new development really complements the existing character and scale of this avenue. So as you can see, the massing here depicts what this district could look like, a new development in context. R7D districts include a height cap of 11 stories or 115 feet. As with all of the corridors, MIH would be introduced here, as well as a requirement that ground floors include community, facility, or commercial uses. This is intended to enhance the vibrant character of the existing commercial corridor here, and also to promote an active and continuous streetscape. So here we can see the steering committee's recommendations for Lexington Avenue in the bottom right. As you can see, with the exception of the 116th Street intersection, which we'll discuss in a moment, the recommendations for Lexington proposed in the steering committee's plan are almost the exact same as what we proposed. While the steering committee recommended either R7D or R8A districts, we selected lower density R7D districts to be responsive to the existing character and scale here. You can see that the massing included in the community's plan rises to approximately 12 stories, with the bulk of the floor area located in the base of the building. We've also included other steering committee recommendations for MIH and required ground floor commercial use, though our proposal would also allow community facility on ground floors. So moving on to 116th Street. Similar to Lexington Avenue, we proposed R7D along much of East 116th Street, with the exception of the avenue intersections. Recall that buildings in R7D districts rise no taller than 11 stories. As I mentioned a moment ago, we proposed a higher density district. We proposed an R9 district at the intersection at Lexington Avenue, adjacent to the existing 116th Street stop on the Lexington Avenue Local 6 line. The illustrative massing here shows developments that we could expect at that particular node. So under the proposed non-contextual R9 district, we could expect buildings ranging from 9 to 17 stories in this particular node. And this transit-oriented strategy is really, it's consistent with our general approach here to selectively target density in areas of opportunity close to transit. We've also proposed the same ground floor commercial or community facility requirements that we can see elsewhere in the rezoning area, in addition to MIH. Again, with the exception of the avenue intersections, we more or less mirrored the recommendations for 116th Street in the steering committee's plan. Note that while we treated the intersection of Lexington and 116th Street a bit differently than what was recommended in their plan, they have expressed a degree of receptivity. The steering committee has been quite receptive to a higher density at that particular node. Along the mid-blocks, we arrived at the lower of the two densities suggested by the steering committee, with the same MIH and ground floor commercial requirements suggested for Lexington Avenue. So next we'll focus on the 3rd Avenue corridor. As we've mentioned previously, 3rd Avenue has a wide street condition and is located just 1 block away from subway stations planned for 2nd Avenue. We found that these unique conditions contribute to the avenue's capacity to accommodate additional density, and we believe that it's appropriate to map higher density in these areas of opportunity adjacent to existing and future transit options. So as you can see in the massing on the top right in the blue box, you can see a few buildings that we could expect to develop under the proposed R10 and R10 equivalent densities. You can expect, or we would expect that, using reasonable development assumptions, no development on Third Avenue rather, would be expected to exceed the height of the Taino Towers development, which tops out at about 330 feet. We would expect most buildings along Third to rise to between 15 and 30 stories. For the northern section of Third Avenue, our proposal would maintain the existing commercial density, and it would permit the same uses as existing C4 districts mapped along the corridor today. Upper story commercial and community facility uses would continue to be allowed on the corridor under our proposal. We've also proposed what many refer to as enhanced commercial regulations here, requirements that will really reinforce the existing retail character of the corridor and create a more desirable pedestrian environment. So these include requirements for transparent materials on storefronts, restrictions on curb cuts, limitations on the width of residential lobbies, as well as the previously mentioned requirement for ground floor commercial or community facility. The steering committee recommended either R9 or R9A districts along most of the corridor and considered either R9 equivalent or R10 equivalent commercial districts closer to the 125th Street corridor. So as you can see, the massing in the community's plan on the bottom right here in the red box, you can see that the massing is 20-story approximately building with a tower in the base-like form. Density along Third Avenue was one of the primary differences between the steering committee's recommendations and our proposal. Our analysis really drove home that Third Avenue was the area with the most opportunity to achieve the goals that we share with the steering committee. The corridor will be located between two major transit lines once the Second Avenue subway is up and running, and the scale of the avenue can easily accommodate buildings that are more proportional to the width of the avenue. We selected lower densities in other locations with a higher density on Third Avenue to arrive at a balanced plan that we believe would best accomplish the larger package of objectives that we share with the steering committee. In any case, the steering committee recommendation to map MIH along Third Avenue would be implemented with our proposal, as with their recommendation for enhanced commercial requirements. Moving east to Second Avenue, we proposed R9 districts with MIH requirements in existing R8A districts along Second Avenue. We also re-examined the special transit land use, or TA districts, that were originally mapped along the avenue in the 1970s. As a reminder, these districts are intended to relate new development to future subway infrastructure. We updated the locations of the TA districts in East Harlem to match the MTA's current plans for the Second Avenue subway. We also amended the TA district text in order to exempt floor area related to subway infrastructure from zoning calculations. So this encourages mixed-use developments that include subway infrastructure within the building, with the added benefit of making the streetscape more desirable for pedestrians. Typically, extra height is needed to allow buildings with lower story subway infrastructure to utilize their full as-of-right floor area. So you can see the massing in the upper right in the blue box. This is what a building could like with that subway infrastructure on lower stories along Second Avenue. While this particular building would rise to about 25 stories, we would expect most buildings along Second Avenue to rise to between 8 and 18 stories.
Could I just ask, what's the southern boundary? Here, I see
The southern boundary is East 104th Street.
Wonderful, thank you.
So here on the bottom right, we've included an image of standalone subway infrastructure that you can see further south on Second Avenue and the Upper East Side. Note the blank building walls, which have a negative effect on a vibrant streetscape. And you can also see that there's a lost opportunity for upper story residential units here. Our proposal is really designed to avoid this type of infrastructure in East Harlem. So the steering committee, again, recommended R9 or R9A districts along this particular corridor, going further to recommend higher density commercial districts closer to 125th Street. In the red box again, you can see that the steering committee prefers the same sort of 20-story tower and a base massing that we saw for Third Avenue. We actually decided to maintain that R9 equivalent density on the northern portion of the avenue where the steering committee contemplated either R9 or R10 due to changes in the planned locations of Second Avenue subway platforms. Our proposal includes non-contextual R9 districts for Second Avenue, one of the options that were proposed by the steering committee, We came to the conclusion that contextual districts would make it difficult to construct mixed-use buildings featuring subway infrastructure, and we found that flexibility here is really needed to accomplish our infrastructure goals. Nonetheless, contextual building envelopes would still be an option here. Other community recommendations related to MIH and subway connectivity have been addressed by our proposal.
Do we know approximately how many people live in the area now?
In the entire neighborhood?
In the entire area that we're discussing?
In the entire neighborhood, there's 120,000 residents, but I'm not
What
in.
percentage of them would you assume is in an MIH mode? Or putting it differently, what percentage of those 120,000 people would there be who are currently not at area median?
That are under area median income? Is that, so we have a slide, I'll click back quickly here so we can take a quick look. There we go. So this is kind of the breakdown of income distribution by household in East Harlem, and we can provide you with more detailed information about that if you'd like.
HPD will also be here on Wednesday at public hearing and providing testimony and answer questions.
I'll tell you where I'm going. You got 120,000 in the area now. At anticipated build-out, if the proposed plan were passed, how many units would there be?
So our increment is close to 3,500 new dwelling units that would be coming to East Harlem.
It's 120,000 now, and you're
So that would be compared to the existing zoning. So that wouldn't be a total number, that would just be the result of our rezoning.
So does 3,500 represent 700 units?
3,500 units,
I mean,
not residents.
700 MIH units?
So we would guess that it would be closer to 1,500 MIH units, because that's, you don't calculate that percentage on the increment alone.
Where I'm trying to go, my questions in the field, how much is the more affluent members of our city going to take that area as opposed to what they give to the current membership in that area, which have lower basic?
I mean, we understand the point, absolutely.
What is the lower income or MIH income projection? What are they getting?
Well, the MIH options that would be available here would be 25% or 30% of the units would be set aside for as affordable housing in the neighborhood. So that's the standard MIH. And
Aren't some of those units going to be relocated? People in those buildings going to be relocated in order to make way for the new buildings?
well, I think this is what HPD was able to provide a lot of detail about in their presentation is the strategies that are being used to mitigate that and prevent that in this neighborhood as much as possible. The analysis that served as the basis for our rezoning looks at sites, and one of the criteria that we use to determine whether sites are likely to develop or not, or whether there are units that are present there today that are occupied by people there today. Those that have, a significant number of units we see as less likely to be developed, precisely because of the strategies that HPD was discussing in their presentation. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we anticipate there's a very small amount of direct displacement that would take place here as a result of these actions. But HPD will be here on Wednesday, and they can speak to that.
Very small amount of
Yes.
displacement?
Yes.
So that displacement number is calculated really looking at the difference between, something that would happen under our proposal and what we could expect under existing zoning. And as we've, mentioned a couple times, the existing zoning in East Harlem is already at an R8 or R8A density. So there is existing in the neighborhood, there's already a good amount of potential for market rate development.
But I don't want the market rate development to come at the expense of the people who can't afford it, and we dispossess, if you will, as many people the end of the day, are we gonna have the same population of inclusionary housing people that we're gonna have today, or are we gonna have more?
Well, right now, there is no mandatory inclusionary housing in East
I
Harlem.
understand that.
And this is about a neighborhood that is changing today. It's changing with no affordable housing requirements in place, and this is the opportunity for us to implement that in this neighborhood. So this is what we're trying to do. The zoning is one piece of that. HPD's actions are a very significant piece of ensuring that the neighborhood remains affordable and that the affordable housing base that's there remains in East Harlem.
If the affordable housing base remains, those words to me mean doesn't get larger.
Well,
Doesn't get larger, what are we giving the community?
Well, this is not a matter of new buildings being constructed on sites that contain existing units and people are going to be forced out of their homes. These are, I think as we saw in the image that I showed at the beginning of the presentation, we have a lot of underutilized sites. We have a lot of parking lots. We have a lot of sites that are very good development opportunities. We have sites that have ground floor retail, but the upper floors are bricked over and have been for decades. And this is about trying to get development in this neighborhood with affordable housing required permanently for the very first time.
Thank you. I allowed the presentation to be disrupted because Commissioner Cantor had indicated earlier that he does need to leave shortly. So thank you.
If there's
If you want-
if there's any more detailed information that would be helpful, we'd be happy to follow up. And apologies for any dizziness that you might get right now. Okay, so back to our comparison between our rezoning proposal and the neighborhood plans, or the community's rezoning proposal. We'll now focus, shifting gears a bit, on preservation areas. So you can see the combination of our proposed preservation areas, and in the highlighter yellow color, you can see the existing contextual districts that exist in East Harlem. These districts were primarily mapped during the 2003 rezoning effort, and as you can see, they do cover a significant chunk of the eastern portion of the neighborhood. So combined with our proposal, these ensure the preservation of existing building form throughout a very large swath of the neighborhood and in the most appropriate areas. As I just mentioned, we propose contextual districts to preserve neighborhood character and also to prevent development that could be inconsistent with the established scale and context of these areas. We propose R7A districts along wide streets, with R7B districts along narrow streets, as these districts were intended to be mapped. These proposed preservation districts provide a counterweight to the rezoning approach in other areas of the neighborhood, contributing to a balanced overall plan that recognizes areas with a consistent and unique local character. So within these areas, the community's plan called for contextual zoning as well, specifically R7A districts or lower. Our proposed mid-block R7B districts have a lower density than R7A, which was only proposed along Madison Avenue. Again, we were respectful of the steering committee's recommendations here, going so far as to propose a lower density to ensure the desired preservation outcomes would be achieved with a more sensitive approach. Particularly when combined with existing contextual districts in East Harlem, our preservation recommendations are another strong component of our balanced and targeted plan. And that wraps up our summary of our rezoning proposal as it compares to the steering committee's plan. As you can see on the slide, this is the larger package of zoning map amendments that we're proposing here. While there are some areas where the two proposals are not exactly the same, we hope it's clear that there are far more areas of overlap than not. We also hope it's clear that in the areas where we took a different approach, we were heavily informed by the existing context of the neighborhood, employing a sound planning rationale to effectively accomplish the goals that we share with the Speaker's steering committee. So I'll quickly finish this section with just a rundown of the proposed actions. I will not talk about these very much. You have a lot of information in your packets. If you have any other questions, we're happy to answer them.
All right, thank you. So this is coming back for pre-hearing. So during the public review process, which it was a very passionate process, I will say, very. Community Board 11 held 2 public hearings, one at the beginning of the process and one at the end. And on June 20th, at their public hearing, they issued a resolution to disapprove with conditions. The Manhattan Borough President held a public hearing on July 16th. And following on August 2nd, issued a resolution to disapprove. Many of the community board conditions and comments noted in the borough president's resolution overlap, and they fall into several broad categories, which I'll go through in these slides. First, going over the zoning and land use recommendations. The recommendations were to generally limit increase in density to R9 equivalents. There were comments about geography of the zoning changes with several recommendations to include certain areas in the rezoning boundaries that were and others to, there were comments about including certain areas that were excluded and excluding other areas. And then there were also comments about the retail regulations, parking garage regulations, and relocation of subway stairs in a single subway stop, and specifically at the East 116 Lexington Avenue node. There were many other conditions related to housing, small business and economic development, and local infrastructure services. Again, a lot of this is included in commissioners' packages, and we're happy to go through any comments or questions that the commissioners may have regarding the resolutions and any of the conditions that the community board included. So just coming off of this public review process, we've heard the concerns. So this leads into our next and last section of our presentation, and it's the ATEX, because we wanted to make sure that there was a greater consideration for some of the comments relevant to building form and scale. So I'm gonna turn it back to Eric so we can quickly go over, the ATEX and then answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thanks again, Calvin. Following certification, as Calvin just mentioned, the department put forward an amended application, or an ATEX, for the commission to consider along with the certified application. The ATEX application responds to comments that we heard during the public review process. Specifically, we heard comments regarding building heights that could result from the rezoning, particularly on 2nd, 3rd, and Park Avenues where higher densities are being proposed. While the certified application contained height limits for preservation districts with strong existing context, as I explained, we did not propose height limits for 2nd, 3rd, or Park. A discussion of height limits is already within scope for much of 2nd and 3rd Avenues, but there were portions of each of these corridors where height limits were not within scope for the commission to consider. The ATEX brings height limits into scope in these areas and allows the commission and the council to consider appropriate building height. As you can see here, we've proposed height limits of between 17 and 20 stories for these areas. We've specified those heights to be responsive to what we heard during public review, that the speaker and others wanted a full range of options on the table for discussion. While our ATEX brings 17 to 20 story building height limits into scope, we do not believe that these are appropriate building heights to adopt here. I want to take some time to explain the department's approach, as it is a bit unorthodox. As you just saw, we've done a tremendous amount of site-by-site analysis to develop our proposal, and the results have shown that in every case, buildings would be no higher than 35 stories, and almost all buildings would be less than 25 stories. We think that these 20 to 30 story buildings are entirely appropriate along the major avenues in East Harlem. That being said, we completely understand that without a height limit on paper, there can be fears that zoning would result in 40, 50, 60 plus story towers that could march along the avenues with our proposal. We heard from the speaker and others that it was important to be able to consider building heights down to the R9A range, or 175 feet. We acted accordingly to be responsive, but we see these heights as the baseline for a full and robust discussion of appropriate built form, not as the end result. We've begun to take an even closer look at what building heights could be appropriate here. Specifically, we're looking for heights that would allow for full utilization of the floor area available in each district, because we stand by our density approach. We would also advocate for a variety of built form, so we don't end up with a monotonous and uniform street wall stretching for dozens of blocks. And most critically, we feel that any zoning adopted in East Harlem should accomplish the objective of producing meaningful and significant affordable housing development. Our initial look leads us to believe that building heights of between 25 and 30 stories could accomplish these goals. We look forward to continuing this discussion with you in the Q&A today and in other post-hearing follow-ups. That concludes today's presentation. Thank you for your time. It's a long agenda today, so we really do appreciate your attention here. Now accept questions from the commission.
And thank you to this team from the Manhattan office for another fabulous presentation of a complex set of considerations. And to the commissioners for our endurance. Questions from the commissioners? Okay, well, we will look forward to the public hearing on Wednesday.
Okay, item number 6, page 514 for public hearing, a proposal for a series of land use actions to facilitate mixed-use development, including affordable housing in Community District 11, Manhattan. Sarah Elmo from the Manhattan office will present item 6, page 514.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development for a number of discretionary actions which will be discussed in greater detail later in the presentation to facilitate the development of 3 mixed-use buildings with residential, commercial, and community facility uses. The project area is an entire block bounded by Park Avenue, East 111th Street, Madison Avenue, and East 112th Street, and is currently zoned R72 with C14 commercial overlays on the Park and Madison Avenue frontages. The project area contains approximately 76,576 square feet of lot area, and the majority of the project area is contained with city-owned parcels, as you can see outlined in this red outline here. The remaining 2 lots located on the project area are privately owned and are not part of the development site. Lot 21, seen right over here, is improved with a single 4-story building, and Lot 34, which is located right here, is currently utilized for surface parking and storage. In prior years, part of the development site was used as a baseball field by the East Harlem Little League under temporary license agreement with HPD. The license agreement expired on October of 2016, and the East Harlem Little League has obtained a permit through the Parks Department to play on a nearby Parks Department field. The lots previously licensed to Little League are currently vacant. The development site currently contains 6 interim Green Thumb community gardens located on city-owned parcels along Park and Madison Avenue frontages. These interim gardens operate under a temporary license agreement with HPD and have allowed for garden-related activities until a viable development scenario can be achieved for the site. The proposed development includes the construction of 3 predominantly residential mixed-use buildings on the development site, ranging in height from 10 to 37 stories. The proposed development will occupy all frontages on the block not otherwise owned by the non-city-owned parcels discussed previously. In total, the proposed development contains approximately 718,500 square feet of floor area, of which approximately 544,000 square feet will be residential, 32,200 square feet will be commercial, and 142,200 square feet of community facility floor area. The 3 predominantly residential buildings will contain approximately 655 affordable housing dwelling units, with a proposed mix of 152 studios, 243 one-bedrooms, 162 bedrooms, and 103 bedroom units. The units will provide housing for individuals and families at a mix of incomes between 30 and 130% of area median income, or AMI. No accessory parking will be provided as a part of the proposed development. Building A is proposed to be located at the intersection of Madison Avenue and East 112th Street and is proposed to rise to 37 stories. Building A will contain approximately 365 residential units. They'll also contain community facility floor area and commercial floor area, which will include a local supermarket. Of the 365 residential units, it is proposed that 164 units will be provided at 130% of area median income, 109 units will be provided at 80% of AMI, and 92 units will be provided at 30% of AMI. Building B is proposed to be located along the remainder of East 112th Street frontage and wrap along the Madison Avenue frontage for a depth of approximately 72 feet and is proposed to rise to a height of 15 stories. Building B will contain approximately 211 residential units and as well as community facility floor area, which will include the Dream Charter School. Of the 211 residential units, it is proposed that 127 units be provided at 60% AMI, 30 units be provided at 50% AMI, and 32 units be provided at 40% AMI, and 22 units be provided at 30% AMI. Building C is proposed to be located on the mid-block frontage of East 111th Street and is proposed to rise to a height of 10 stories. Building C will contain approximately 79 residential units and community facility use. Of the 79 residential units proposed for Building C, it is proposed that 47 units be provided at 60% AMI, 12 units be provided at 50% AMI, and 20 units be provided at 30% of AMI. Buildings A, B, and C will be built to passive house standards, which exceed LEED standards. The proposed buildings will form an approximately 17,000 square foot courtyard within the center of the proposed development and will provide passive landscape recreation space and proposes to include features such as a medicinal garden, seating, and general green space. Public entrances to the courtyards will be provided along Park Avenue through a staircase and elevator. So the staircase will be right over here and the elevator will be directly adjacent to it, as well as along East 111th Street through an ADA accessible ramp seen right here. The courtyard will also be accessible through rear entrances adjoining adjoining community facility spaces, so through Building B and through Building C. The garden area will accommodate approximately 4 of the existing interim green thumb gardens. The remaining 2 community gardens located on the development site have been offered relocation sites on other nearby existing Parks Department gardens pursuant to the garden rules. A dedicated community room, a bathroom, which will be available to all members of all 4 gardens, will be located within Building A. An additional bathroom will be located adjacent to the community gardens on Park Avenue. Additionally, the public pathway will pass through the gardens located on East 111th Street, connecting to the interior courtyard, which must be maintained by the owner of the proposed development and remain accessible to the public during the daylight hours. The applicant seeks a zoning map amendment to change the project area from an R72 district with C14 commercial overlays along the Park and Madison Avenue frontages to a R9 district with C25 commercial overlays along the Park and Madison Avenue frontages. The applicant also seeks to amend Appendix F of the zoning resolution to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area over the project area. The applicant is proposing to utilize option 1 and the deep affordability option. The applicant is also requesting approval of an urban development action area and project approval, as well as the disposition of city-owned property. And the applicant requests to acquire a portion of the disposition area for use as community garden space and a publicly accessible path. The garden area and path portion will be acquired by the city upon or before project completion, including completion of construction of the garden area and path. The applicant is seeking a special permit from the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 74743 to modify the bulk regulations within a large-scale general development, to modify height and setback regulations, and yard requirements applicable to the proposed development. The requested modifications are detailed in the briefing materials and provided for you. The applicant requests a special permit from the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 74532 to waive up to 129, a special permit pursuant to Section 74744B to permit commercial use to be located above the level of the second story in a mixed-use building, to permit healthcare-related offices to be located on the third level of Building A. The applicant also requests a special permit pursuant to Section 74532 to waive up to 129 accessory off-street parking spaces required in connection with the up to 322 units affordable to families earning over 80% AMI within the proposed development. Finally, the applicant requests a certification from the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 32435 to waive the requirement that a minimum of 50% of a building wall facing upon a wide street be occupied at the ground level by commercial uses. These applications were referred to Community Board 11 on April 21st. At a special full board meeting on June 27th, the board voted to recommend approval of these applications with 29 in favor, 5 opposed, and 3 abstaining, on the condition that the development be 100% permanently affordable, that the developer make a commitment to hire locally, that the affordability levels be deepened, and that the highest affordable units be distributed amongst all 3 buildings, that the open space be accessible to the public in perpetuity, and that appropriate public space signage be provided, that any community partners that are approved by the community board, and that the site and the development be made ADA compliant, and that additional safety training and security monitors be provided for a safe construction site, and for the developer to provide the community board with quarterly updates. The borough president recommended to approve these applications on the condition that the development team work to reach deeper levels of affordability, that the development team make extending the duration of time that units that are not permanently affordable remain affordable by partnering with nonprofit developers and studying the use of restrictive covenants on the deeds, and that the design result in a prominent and distinctive buildings that complement the character of the surrounding area, and that the development team provide regular updates to the community board. Thank you.
Questions from the commissioners? Yes, Vice Chair Nichols.
I just wanted to clarify on those 2 rectangular parcels, one on Madison and the other on 112, that are privately owned?
They are privately owned, yes, and originally they were attempting to acquire those lots, but they did not want to sell. So will remain privately owned and they'll be separate.
And
always.
how are they going to,
They'll both be rezoned R9, but that's the only part of this that will change for them.
so is that white building,
This white
is that the
building right
privately
here,
owned?
that's the privately owned 4-story building that
Right,
exists.
right.
And then over here is the privately owned lot that's currently being utilized as parking and storage.
So in the future, what would that?
In the future, they would have the right to, as of right, develop an R9 building as much as they can. I am not sure of the exact size of the lot, but they would be able to develop on those lots.
But they wouldn't be,
They would be subject to MIH, correct?
but they couldn't use it as parking, continue to use it as,
Sure they can. Yeah, they can continue to use it as parking if that's what they choose to do.
Non-conforming use. Commissioner Marin?
Sarah, question. I noticed that Commissioner Knuckles' question was regarding a smaller building. Excuse me, I think it was irrelevant.
Whoever.
Saying that you could build an R9 building there, but you have a building being proposed with windows. So is there going to be a restricted declaration on this? Are those lot line windows illegal? It seems like they start right at the roof line of that existing building.
So the new construction will have to comply with all the legal requirements and building code for legalized like windows. So there is a restrictive declaration that will be included as a part of the large-scale development. From what I understand, there's nothing regarding lot line windows in the restrictive deck at this moment. It has a lot of information regarding the accessibility to the open space, et cetera. But it's something that could be considered.
I'm just asking because in the future, this small building decides it wants to, tear down and go to R9 standard, it's gonna affect some of those windows. I can't say it's gonna go all 30 stories, but.
Yeah, I think it's probably a 25-foot fronting lot, so I'm not really sure how much additional development they could get on that site. But I can definitely look into that and see, yeah. Mhm.
Commissioner Delos?
Hi, 2 questions. Do we, on Wednesday, will they be presenting like a phasing plan for this project? Do we anticipate that, did that come up at all during the community board and borough president hearing?
I don't know that they'll be presenting a phasing plan. I think I can let the development team know that that might be something that you're interested in learning about. I'm not sure to the extent of how well they might be aware of what exactly that might be at this time, but I will definitely let them know.
Okay. And obviously, you know, we're going to ask about the recommendations from the community board about reducing the percent of 130% of AMI units, and be helpful to know where they're at in their conversations with HPD about financing. And then, you know, we haven't spent as much time on this, and quite honestly, the recommendations don't really speak to it much either, about the amendments to the urban renewal plan outside of this site, to the extent that HPD is coming on Wednesday to talk about the overall proposal. It'd be helpful to learn a little bit more about those changes to the urban renewal plan overall, separate from the site.
Okay, great.
Yes, Commissioner Efron.
Yes, in fact, I was wondering if this actually had a wide street and 2 wide avenues, and there was another project, would it wouldn't have to come before us to be a much taller tower if they so chose, if they had a similar, I'm just trying to figure out with this amendment for the overall large-scale development, whether that signals or triggers any changes in any other development within the proposed rezoning area that would result in an extremely tall building without any restrictive declaration or approval by us. Does that make sense?
I
Okay.
think there's only the two lots, and I can verify the lot sizes of
Oh.
both.
I actually didn't mean those two. I meant in the whole rezoning.
Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha.
Sorry, I didn't mean those 2 little ones. I don't think they can go very high.
No, yeah.
Other questions? Okay, so we'll have an opportunity for questions at the public hearing on Wednesday.
Okay, please now turn to page 629 for item number 7 for public hearing, a special permit and commission certification to allow for additional parking spaces and 1 curb cut within the Manhattan core. Our presenter is Richard Suarez of the Manhattan office. We are on item number 7, page 629.
That's not me. I'm also afraid to touch this. I hear it's going to collapse. This is a private application for a special permit pursuant to sections 1345 and 13451 to allow a total of 64 accessory residential parking spaces at 220 Central Park South, and a joint certification by the City Planning Commission and the Department of Transportation pursuant to section 2615 to allow more than 1 curb cut on the narrow street frontage of the proposed development. The application is returning for public hearing following review by Manhattan Community Board 5 and the Borough President. As we reviewed, 220 Central Park South is located at the southern end of Central Park and just east of Columbus Circle here, and then Midtown is to the south and to the east in Manhattan Community Board 5. The development occupies this L-shaped portion of this larger zoning lot, so the development's in red, larger zoning lot in white, which occupies the most of the block bounded by Central Park South to the north, 7th Avenue to the east, West 58th Street to the south, and Broadway and Columbus Circle to the west. The zoning lot and development sites, just kind of shifting a bit, is split between an R10H district here and a C51 district, and is located outside of the special Midtown district, which is shown here in hatched and follows the center line between 58th and 57th, coming up to Columbus Circle. Central Park South, here to the north, is a wide street that carries traffic in both directions. West 58th Street, here to the south, is a narrow street that carries eastbound traffic, and then both 7th Avenue and Broadway are wide streets that carry southbound traffic. Zooming in a bit more, so the applicant proposes to develop this L-shaped portion of the zoning lot with a new 66-story mixed-use building containing 118 dwelling units and 64 attended accessory parking spaces on the ground floor and sub-cellar levels. The development occupies 75 feet of frontage on Central Park South, about 200 feet on West 58th Street. The portion of the proposed development on Central Park South will rise to about 240 feet, and that's the villa. And then on the West 58th Street side will be a 950-foot tower. And then, as we saw, here's the villa component here, and then on Central Park South, and behind it is the tower. And as I mentioned, at certification, an as-of-right development containing 118 units and 24 parking spaces is currently under construction.
Right, so while the proposed development is mostly as of right, the applicant is seeking a special permit to allow an increase in the number of parking spaces from the as of right amount of 24 to 64, and a joint certification by the commission and the DOT to allow 2 additional curb cuts on the narrow street frontage, the West 58th Street frontage of the zoning lot. Again, so zooming into the ground floor plan, this is a pedestrian entrance on Central Park South, and then the vehicular entrances will be here on West 58th Street. There's an entrance to the motor court here, which will be accessed by a 22-foot curb cut. And then about 129 feet to the west is another 22-foot curb cut that will access the proposed parking facility, which will then ramp down to where the attendant and then the elevators would be, and the reservoir spaces will be located in this lane here. I think I'm missing it. Okay, right. And then this is an elevation of the West 58th Street frontage. Here's the motor court, and here is the garage entrance. There was a question at certification about the gates. I should clarify that the gates will be open during the day, and then late night, the gates will be closed. Drop-off would take place on the curb, and here drivers would have a remote in their car to open the door. This is late at night, after midnight. And then taking a section through, here's the ground floor, here's the entrance to the facility. So we're looking this way, we're just cutting through, again, looking north. Vehicles enter on the ground floor, take an elevator down to the subcellar level where the 64 spaces will be, 57 on the surface and 7 elevated. And these 64 spaces will replace 173 spaces that previously existed on the site. As part of the request for the special permit, to increase the number of parking spaces from 24 to 64, the applicant examined the change in residential units and residential parking spaces between 2005 and 2018 within a third mile of the site, both with and without the project. I should note that prior to the department referring the application to the community board, staff noticed that the growth study did not account for the loss of residential units on the site, and also did not identify another development, the Roseland development, 242 West 53rd Street, which is right there, that the commission considered in May. So previously, the growth ratio without the project was 9.78%, and with the project was 10.26%. With the revisions that are included in your package, the ratio without the project is now 15.53%, and with the project is 16.5%. The number of additional parking spaces being requested, going from 24 to 64, has not changed, so these revisions do not affect the extent of the applicant's request. Moving on to the certification, only one curb cut is permitted on a narrow street frontage of a zoning lot. So here's the proposed parking entrance, and here's the motor court entrance. Again, West 58th carries eastbound traffic. Currently, there are 4 curb cuts on the narrow street frontage of the zoning lot. We have the 3 here in front of the development site and 1 just to the west that's serving a trash storage facility for this development, this residential development here. The applicant proposes to replace these 3 curb cuts here with these two in red. But since the curb cut to the west is going to remain, typically no new curb cuts are allowed on a narrow street frontage of a zoning lot. But since the zoning lot is over 30,000 square feet, additional curb cuts on the street may be permitted along this narrow street frontage, provided that the Commission and the Department of Transportation certify that these additional curb cuts will not result in conflict between pedestrians and vehicular circulation and result in a good overall site plan. The special permit was certified on June 19th and was referred to, along with the application for the joint certification, to the Community Board. And on July 14th, Manhattan Community Board 5 held a public hearing, and by a vote of 32 in favor, 3 opposed, and 1 abstaining, issued a resolution recommending approval of both applications. On August 14th, the Manhattan Borough President issued a letter recommending approval of the special permit. In that letter, the Borough President reiterated her concern for the parking methodology that she has expressed in recommendations for other parking special permits that the Commission has considered, and once again urges the Commission to reconsider the parking calculation methodology to include a more robust set of factors. The Borough President did not comment on the application for the certification. And in addition to the edits in the briefing and to the growth ratio, the application materials were updated to include the 60-foot curb cut across the street on West 58th Street, the Nordstrom Tower. So previously that was not included in the materials, and now your drawings are updated and the narrative is updated to include that curb cut. That's it, and open for questions.
Questions from commissioners? Okay, to the public hearing on Wednesday with this item.
Item number 8, page 742 for public hearing, a proposed special permit for good faith marketing application to allow ground floor retail uses in an existing building. Annie White from the Manhattan office will present item 8, page 742.
Okay. Good afternoon. This is an application for a special permit for a property located at 449 Broadway in Community District 2 in the Borough of Manhattan. The applicant for this project is 449 Broadway LLC. And again, this is a special permit to allow use group 6 commercial use on the ground floor and cellar, totaling approximately 8,000 square feet of an existing 5-story building. The property outlined here in the blacked out line is located on Broadway between Howard Street to the south and Grand Street to the north. The underlying zoning district is M15B, which permits light industrial and commercial uses as of right. Use group 6 retail uses are not permitted as of right below the level of the second floor. The applicant proposes to use 4,000 square feet of gross floor area in the cellar and approximately 4,200 square feet of zoning floor area on the ground floor for use group 6 retail. Office uses will remain on the upper floors and the building bulk will remain unchanged. Here are plans for the cellar and the ground floor, the dark gray shaded area being the floor area with the special permit. At the review session, I went through the marketing efforts, and just for the sake of time, I've cut down the presentation, but if there's any further questions on this, please let me know. At its full board meeting on July 20th, Manhattan Community Board 2 voted unanimously in favor of a resolution recommending approval of the application. We have not yet received the Borough President letter. It is due today, and as of 15 minutes ago when I checked my phone, I had not yet received it. So I've been told it will be in by the public hearing, and I will include that as a memo. And that concludes my presentation.
Questions from commissioners? Thank you. This goes to the public hearing on Wednesday.
Annie also will present the next item, item number 9 on page 775, a zoning text amendment to establish C6-7 signage regulations for specific lots in the 8th Avenue corridor of the Special Theater Subdistrict, Community District 4, Manhattan. Item number 9, page 775. Please note for the record that Commissioner Knight is recused.
Okay. Hello again. As Hannah said, this is an application for a text amendment to allow signage provisions for a site at the corner of 42nd Street and 8th Avenue in the Special Midtown District, Community District 4, Borough of Manhattan. The applicant for this is Midtown Equities LLC, and it is a text amendment to modify signage provisions to allow C6-7 signage rules to apply in an underlying C6-4 district at a property at 661 8th Avenue. The project site outlined here in the red dashed line is currently a 2-story retail building with accessory non-illuminated signage. It is located directly north across 42nd Street from the Port 30 bus terminal in the blue outline on this image and just west of Times Square. So at this intersection, the site is the only corner with the C6-4 underlying zoning. So all other corners at this intersection already have the C6-7 signage regulations. And that's evident by these images of the 3 other corners. The site for the proposals at the top left and the other 3 C6-7 corners are shown on this slide. So the applicant seeks this text amendment to facilitate the installation of an illuminated advertising sign on the roof of an existing 2-story retail building. The proposed signage would face southeast into Times Square. So this proposed C6-7 signage regulation would allow accessory and advertising signage. There is no size limitation on both and nor any limits on height above curb level. The text amendment will create a new section in the theater subdistrict which further specifies the C6-7 underlying regulations so that the signage may not produce sound and the illuminated signs may only face diagonally to face both wide streets facing into Times Square or to face one of the wide streets, and this is to avoid any illumination facing west or north into the residential Clinton neighborhood. There's also additional locational requirements, so it will only apply to a specific corner lot portions of zoning lots bounded by 2 wide streets within the special districts. So really within the area of the red dashed line in this image is the only applicable area. So for the recommendations at its full board meeting on July 26th, the Manhattan Community Board 4 voted in favor of a resolution recommending approval of the application. And on August 14th, the Manhattan Borough President issued a recommendation to approve the application. So here's one more image of the site, looking north along 8th Avenue. You can see the rendered portion of the sign peeking out there beyond the Port Authority bus terminal. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. Could you just explain the building behind it and whether those windows, is that a hotel?
It is a residential building. I wonder if it's better in the other image. Not, yeah, here we go. So they already have they don't have they have lot line window restrictions as it is. So currently it's an occupied residential building, and it's under separate ownership.
But in theory, this sign could go up 10 stories.
It
There's
could.
no height restriction.
Correct. And in the reasonable worst case development scenario, it did look at a larger sign.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Okay, another item for what promises to be a jam-packed public hearing on Wednesday.
Could someone please get Commissioner Knight back into the room? The next item is number 10, page 786 for public hearing, proposal for an acquisition of a building for continued use of a daycare center in Community District 2, Brooklyn. Our presenter is Amrita Mahesh from the Brooklyn office, item number 10, page 786.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The Administration for Children's Services and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services requests approval for the acquisition of a property to facilitate the continued use of the building as a daycare facility. The last application for the acquisition of the site was approved by the City Planning Commission on December 14, 1994. The 20-year lease for the property expired on May 18, 2015. As the Commission may recall, the Warren Street Center is located in the Borum Hill neighborhood of Community District 2 in Brooklyn on Warren Street between Smith and Hoyt Streets. The project site is mapped with an R6B zoning district. The building is privately owned and has been leased by the city since 1974. The Warren Street Center occupies the entire two-story building, including the cellar and rooftop. These are images of the project site. This application was certified on June 19, 2017, and was duly referred to Community Board 2 and Brooklyn Borough President. On July 10, 2017, the Community Board 2 submitted a letter waiving review of this application, citing that the Community Board's district office has received no complaints regarding the facility. On July 25, 2017, the Brooklyn Borough President held a public hearing and issued a recommendation to approve the application without modifications or conditions. Additional recommendations were regarding lease renewal terms and streetscape improvements. That concludes my presentation.
Questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Levin.
I would just note that this has a very, like so many others, this has a very stark appearance on the street, and the entrance is essentially invisible. It's down an alley sort of thing. And I wonder, given our last discussion about renewed attention by this agency to urban design issues, whether there's some help for this building.
What we are doing as a department is asking our urban design team to see if they can come up with some inexpensive suggested interventions so that as these come forward, we will have discussed the proposals, which will be presented to the commission with both ACS and DCAS. And in having spoken with the DCAS commissioner, she welcomes this input. Obviously, we're not looking for a wholesale redo of the buildings. We realize that these are valued centers, and we don't want to make dealing with the city so expensive that they will not be renewing these useful facilities. We won't be in a position in time for these particular matters, but we are looking prospectively to see what it is that we can do.
Well, then I would hope that DCAS and ACS, when they come to the hearing, could indicate to us whether they've themselves perhaps given some attention to simple, inexpensive interventions that would give this a better appearance from the street.
We'll relay the comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? I actually will note that thanks to some material that Commissioner Efron sent me, I learned that buildings of this shape are pejoratively referred to as Lindsay boxes, because they came into being at a time when almost nothing was being built in the city except for these boxes. Okay, so this item will go to the public hearing on Wednesday.
Okay, item number 11, page 815 for public hearing and proposed zoning text and map amendments to facilitate development of mixed-use buildings with affordable residential units in Community District 5, Brooklyn. Corin Manning from the Brooklyn office will present item 11, page 815.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is an application by Canyon Sterling Emerald LLC seeking a rezoning and zoning text amendment to facilitate the development of a vacant block with 4 buildings providing 521 affordable housing units, as well as retail and community facility uses in East New York, Brooklyn. The project area is located in Brooklyn Community District 5, just 1 block west of the Queensboro border. The project area will consist of an entire block measuring 100,000 square feet, an area which is currently vacant. The project area borders on Linden Boulevard to the north, Loring Avenue to the south, and Emerald and Amber Streets on the east and west. Frontage along Linden Boulevard is zoned R4C12 at a depth of 100 feet, and the remainder of the block is zoned R4. As you can see, the surrounding area includes residential, commercial, and community facility uses in R4, R6, and C41 districts. South of the project area are 1 to 6-story multifamily walk-up buildings. West of the project area is a medical facility, a movie theater, and then the Louise H. Pink houses, which consists of 22 8-story buildings, a NYCHA complex here. And then Linden Plaza, just to the northwest, is a complex with 5 17-story towers on top of a platform above the train yard. As well, there is 1 to 4-story residential and community facility and commercial uses north of Linden Boulevard. Linden Boulevard is served by a local bus and express bus. But the project area is over a half mile from the Grant Avenue A station, the nearest subway station, and is outside the transit zone. As you can see, the entire block is currently vacant. There is one unique site condition of note, which is that Loring Avenue, which is the southern end of the block, ends at Amber Street, where a retaining wall separates the 2 streets. At the southwest corner, Loring Avenue is approximately 7.5 feet higher in elevation than Amber Street. The applicant proposes to construct 4 new buildings for residential, commercial, and community facility uses on the project area around the border of Block 4496, the proposed project site. The proposed development will range in height from 12 to 8 stories and will contain just over 452,000 square feet of floor area for a total FAR of 4.52, and this would include 521 affordable housing units. Building 1 will be 12 stories with 234 units, as well as retail at the ground floor. Building 3 at the southern end of the block would be 9 stories with 76 housing units, as well as community facilities at the ground floor. And then buildings 2 and 4 at the mid-block would rise to 8 stories with approximately 100 dwelling units each. And building 2 would have just over 7,000 square feet, 7,700 square feet of community facility space at the ground floor. This would potentially be a daycare. The proposed project would include 16,000 square feet of open space in the form of landscaped roofs and terraces, as well as accessory parking for 100 cars in structured parking at grade. The applicant is seeking financing for this proposed 100% affordable housing project under HPD and HDC's Extremely Low and Low Income Affordability Program, ELA, as well as HPD's Our Space Initiative and the Mixed Income Program, Mix and Match. The proposed development requires 2 actions: 1, a zoning map amendment, and 2, a zoning text amendment to designate the project area as an MIH area. The proposed zoning map amendment would change the zoning district on the northern portion of the site at a depth of 100 feet from R4 to R8A C24, would change the mid-block from R4 to R6A, and then the southern portion of the block at 100-foot depth from Loring Avenue from R4 to R7A. The proposed residential districts permit residential and community facility uses, and then commercial uses would be allowed along Linden Boulevard within the commercial overlay. The proposed districts would allow a maximum FAR of 4.52 across the entire site. The second action is a proposed zoning text amendment to map mandatory inclusionary housing on this site, in which options 1 and 2 would be applicable. The applicant proposes to use option 2. Under this option, 157 out of 521 proposed dwelling units would be permanently affordable to households at an average of 80% AMI, while the entire project would be affordable per regulatory agreements. Community Board 5 voted 26 in favor with 1 opposed and 3 abstentions to approve this application with the following conditions: that additional lighting be provided around the perimeter of the project site, that the project implement measures to allow safe access to the proposed daycare sites, and that the 100 parking spaces be provided on site at the time of project completion. The borough president actually just submitted a recommendation in the last 20 minutes. So we haven't had time to fully digest that, but he did recommend approval with conditions. One of the conditions was that this R7A district be mapped as R6B, a lower density district, and then had other recommendations related to the daycare, supporting use in that community facility space for arts organizations and cultural groups, and environmental sustainability measures. But again, we haven't had time to review that thoroughly quite yet, but we will do that, and we'll be providing a copy to all of you very shortly.
Questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Delauze.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the recommendation from the community board about the parking compared to what was originally proposed. It seems that the community board understands that the commitment from the developer is for subsurface parking, but is that?
Actually, it's at grade. They're going to be developing the parking at grade and then building above.
So that's what the developer's proposing, but according to the community board's recommendation, they specifically say subsurface.
Right. So my understanding is that would be very difficult because of the site conditions here. There's a lot of grade issues, and it would be
So
difficult.
I guess my question is that a misunderstanding of the community board? Or I'm trying to understand what was said.
Right,
what
the
was-
motivation, yeah. I'm not actually sure, but we could try to find out more about
Okay,
that,
that would-
and have them respond
I
at the
also know it'd
hearing.
be pretty costly, especially for a project with this level of affordability.
Right.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
I was just gonna hope it would be helpful if we could have these before the hearing. Both this borough president's recommendation, there was one from the Manhattan Borough President that
Oh,
is awaited. It's easier to get them by email, so we have a chance to.
oh, definitely. We'll be emailing that as soon as possible after this session.
As soon as
today.
we can get back to the office.
For dinner.
Yes, absolutely. We want you to have time to review it. It's pretty lengthy.
Commissioner Marin.
I just want to question the parking. I see that there's a landscape terrace over it, so it's not subsurface, but it is covered. And what are the accommodations being made to vent that parking?
I'm not sure about the venting of the parking. So there's actually parking at grade with the residential above, and then, yeah, landscaped. There will be a landscape courtyard in the middle above that parking. But I'm not sure about the venting. I can find out if our environmental review looked at that.
Yeah, the reason why I ask is because there's been several instances where these covered parkings have these venting devices installed, and they're in the courtyard, they're still in the mix of the housing.
Right.
So I can understand where the subsurface parking concern comes in, and the venting now plays a bigger role, because it's gonna affect that landscape courtyard, so it may affect that landscape courtyard.
Right.
So we can find out what that is, I would appreciate it.
And we can certainly ask the applicants when they come on Wednesday. Yes, Vice Chair Nichols.
Yeah, given the community board's vote, I guess this is not an issue, but I'm just wondering nonetheless, what is the AMI in Community District 5?
The AMI is around 40% of AMI for households, about 50% for families.
Commissioner Arfon? Okay, we'll see this again on Wednesday. Thank you.
Item number 12, page 860, for a public hearing, proposal for several actions, including a zoning text amendment to facilitate the development of a new mixed-use building with supportive and affordable housing in Community District 16, Brooklyn. Anthony Grande from the Brooklyn office will present. Item 12, page 860.
Good afternoon. This is an application by the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development for UDAP with disposition, zoning map and zoning text amendments, and a zoning special permit to facilitate the development of a new 8-story mixed-use building containing 126 units of supportive and affordable housing. The project area is in western Brownsville, which is a neighborhood in eastern Brooklyn within Community District 16. The project area consists of one tax lot, which makes up a full block front of Livonia Avenue between Howard Avenue and Grafton Street. The surrounding area is primarily residential, with retail on East 98th Street as well as on Livonia Avenue. The project area is owned by HPD and is currently vacant. As we can see in the aerial, the elevated 3-line runs along over Livonia Avenue here and turns as well onto East 98th Street. The project area is well served by public transit. The 3-line station is located here adjacent to the project area. Saratoga Avenue Station, that is. The proposed development would be an 8-story mixed-use building containing 125 units of supportive and affordable housing, 1 superintendent's unit, as well as cellar office space for delivery of on-site support services for residents, and leasable ground floor space fronting on Livonia Avenue. At least 60% of the units would be supportive units for the formerly homeless. The remainder would be affordable units for individuals and families with incomes at or below 60% AMI. So this view is with the elevated infrastructure in front of the building. The actions requested by the applicant are a zoning map amendment to amend the R6 district to an R72 C23 district. Zoning text amendment to map a mandatory inclusionary housing area with options 1 and 2. And then also we have the urban development action area designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property. And then also the zoning special permits pursuant to zoning resolution 74903, which allows the floor area for this project. The FAR would be increased from the 3.44 that's allowed as of right for this use to the 4.79 that's being proposed by the applicants. There was a question at certification about the unit mix, so I've provided it within the presentation as well as in the briefing package. So the supportive and affordable units would both range from studios to 3 bedrooms. Community Board 16 held a public hearing and voted to approve with no conditions, 21 in favor, 0 opposed, 1 abstaining. The borough president submitted a recommendation of approval with no conditions, however, with several requests listed. So the first 2 requests are of the applicant, particularly the project sponsor. So one would be to rent the ground floor space to local arts groups and community organizations, and another to include bioswales as part of the builder's pavement plan. The third is a request that DCP consider upzoning all of Livonia Avenue in Brownsville to R7D or C44L, in addition to a portion of East 98th Street. The final request is that New York City Transit advance construction on the free transfer improvements to the Livonia Junius station. I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Questions from commissioners? Thank you. Another item for Wednesday's public hearing.
And item number 13, page 909 for public hearing, a proposed zoning text and map amendments to facilitate mixed-use buildings in Community District 2, Brooklyn. Anand Amin from the Brooklyn office will present item 13, page 909.
Good late afternoon, commissioners. This is
I'd call this almost evening.
This 200 Prince Street is a private application by YYY Brooklyn LLC requesting a rezoning and zoning text amendments to facilitate a new approximately 234,000 mixed residential development with 79 permanently affordable units and ground floor retail in downtown Brooklyn. Community District 2. The site's located in downtown Brooklyn, the city's third largest central business district. The proposed rezoning area is located at the corner of Tiller and Prince Street on a superblock that contains NYCHA's Ingersoll Houses campus. The Flatbush Avenue extension is 2 blocks to the west, and the BQE is directly north of the rezoning area. The area is well served by transit with the 2, 3, 4, 5 BD, NR, and Q lines all within 6 blocks, along with numerous bus lines running along the various streets. The proposed rezoning area consists of 3 tax lots, Lot 100, Lot 104, and a portion of Lot 1. Lot 100, the proposed development site, is a 19,524 square foot irregular L-shaped lot and is improved with a 5-story, 114,000 square foot public storage facility. Lot 104 is at the corner of the superblock, and it is improved with an 8-story, approximately 65,000 square foot community facility used as a homeless shelter. And then the small portion of NYCHA's campus on Lot 1 that's included within the rezoning boundary is an underutilized fenced-off open space and a surface loading area, which is used by the storage facility under a licensing agreement with NYCHA. The proposed rezoning area is directly adjacent to the special downtown Brooklyn district and is mapped entirely by an R6 zoning district. This non-contextual district allows for medium-density residential and community facility uses and typically results in buildings between 6 to 11 stories in a tower and a park setting. The private application is proposing to develop a new 21 to 23-story, approximately 234,000 square foot mixed residential development. The project would include 220,000 square feet of residential floor area with a total of approximately 262 units, of which 79 would be permanently affordable, and approximately 13,700 square feet of ground floor retail. The project would have a 1-story retail base with a 21-story, 212-foot high residential tower fronting on Prince Street and a 23-story, 235-foot high residential tower fronting on Tillery Street. The retail base would have entrances on Tillery Street and Prince Street, along with some entrances facing NYCHA. And since certification, the applicant team and the NYCHA Tenants Association have come to an agreement to provide an open space that's landscaped on the eastern side of the development between the NYCHA campus and the proposed development. In order to facilitate the proposed development, the applicant is proposing a zoning map change and zoning text amendments. The applicant is proposing to rezone the existing R6 to a C64. The zoning boundary would extend the existing C64 eastward. The C64 district is a high-density commercial, residential, and community facility district with a maximum FAR of 12 with MIH. Pursuant to quality housing regulations, the C64 district has a maximum base height of 155 feet and a maximum height of 235 feet. The applicant is also proposing to extend the special downtown Brooklyn district, as shown here. Additionally, the applicant is requesting to extend the Flatbush Avenue extension height limitation area with a height restriction of 400 feet over the rezoning area. Lastly, the applicant is requesting to designate the proposed project areas as a mandatory inclusionary housing area with option 1, requiring 25% of affordable units with an average AMI of 60%. The proposed actions were certified and referred out by the department on June 19th. At their general meeting in June, Committee Board 2 authorized the Executive Committee to act on the board's behalf while on summer recess. The Committee Board 2 held a public hearing on June 21st, and on June 26th, the Executive Committee voted to approve the zoning change and the zoning text amendments. 8 in favor, 1 opposed, and 0 abstaining, with a condition requesting that the applicant team provide written commitment to the amenities requested by the Ingersoll Houses Tenants Association. Subsequently, the development team has provided written commitments to ensure that the proposed landscape open space adjacent to the proposed development would be open and accessible to the Ingersoll Houses residents. To provide an enclosure and refrigerated trash containers to accommodate Ingersoll House's refuse, and to include commercial uses along the ground floor that would be beneficial to Ingersoll Houses, such as a daycare facility and/or medical offices. On July 25th, the Borough President held a public hearing, and there was one speaker against the application. On August 16th, the Borough President recommended to approve the application with conditions that include that the applicant legally provide for the following: create a framework and agreement with NYCHA to execute the landscaped open space and the refrigerated trash containers, fund the improvement and receive design approval from the Tenants Association, actively seek daycare use, medical office, and cultural uses for the ground floor, provide the Administration of Children's Services, ACS, an opportunity to lease the space in the building, modify MIH requirements for this site so that the affordable set-aside increases incrementally to 40%, and to seek a local workforce and pay prevailing wages for the construction. Furthermore, the applicant should provide written commitment to the City Council for various conditions listed here. And then lastly, the Borough President requests the following: either the CPC or City Council modify MIH to allow for rent-burdened individuals to qualify for MIH affordable housing, the Department of Transportation to determine feasibility for an expansion of City Bike to the area, and the Department of Buildings to tie their certificate of occupancy to the aforementioned improvements. In conclusion, the applicants are requesting a rezoning and a zoning text amendment to facilitate a approximately 234,000 square foot mixed residential development in downtown Brooklyn Community District 2.
I have to say that it was a pleasure to end the pre-hearing items on one that bespeaks such a good relationship between the applicant and the NYCHA residents, leading to what looks to be a felicitous result for the NYCHA residents. Questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Delahoo's.
Can I just ask a follow-up question about the refuse and the recommendation that it also be refrigerated? Do you have any background on that you can share?
I think it's just a type of container that can prevent that smell and keep it sort of protected. But the applicants can speak to the details of that.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Levin.
That's potentially a huge commitment by the developer, so we'll
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
we'll find out more.
I walked by
I
this
hesitate to ask for more paper, but, or maybe I missed it as I roared into the 900 pages, but I don't think we got a copy of the Borough President's recommendation.
Yeah, it had come in late, but I think you guys should have gotten paper copies today, but we can follow up and
You
send
sure
that
we
as
get it?
well.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Other requests for more documents? I think all of us struggled with our weekend homework. Other questions? Okay, before we, so this item will go to the public hearing on Wednesday. Before we turn to post-hearing follow-up and future votes, I just want to remind the commissioners that we are going to be having the public hearing at 1 Center Street, the municipal building, up on the mezzanine level to be able to handle what we anticipate to be a larger than usual audience. So back to you, Hannah.
Okay, so
Oh, I'm sorry, and we're starting at 9:30 as well.
And the entrance is in the
north.
North.
Yeah. You'll probably see city planning staff outside guiding you up as well.
And we'll also have people here prepared to direct any folks who show up over here to.
Okay, so in addition to the hearing on Wednesday, August 23rd, staff have prepared favorable resolutions for the following items. On August 23rd, we have a proposal to acquire office space for the Fire Department of New York. For Lower Concourse North rezoning, staff from the Bronx office are available for questions about the report prepared for approval. 1675 Westchester Avenue rezoning, a zoning text and map amendments to facilitate a new mixed-use building. Next item is a proposed acquisition for office space for the Taxi and Limousine Commission located at 2500 Halsey Street in the Bronx. Engine 268 Ladder Company 137 relocation, a site selection and acquisition of property to relocate a firehouse in Rockaway, Queens. 193-02 Horace Harding Expressway, minor modification to reconfigure the ground floor of an existing residential building. Bless you. Soho Towers, a special permit for an additional 14 parking spaces in an automated garage. Also, we have West Village Houses and Perry Street Garage, an authorization to eliminate required off-street parking spaces for an existing residential development. And last on Wednesday, we have 53 Downing Street, an authorization for a single residential parking space. No? Okay, assuming no concerns about the above, we can move to September 6th. We have the South Avenue Retail Development, which is an application for a street demapping and special permit to facilitate construction of a shopping center. Staff from Staten Island office are here to answer any questions you may have regarding recent correspondence for the project. Okay. We also have 135-01 35th Avenue rezoning, proposed zoning map and text amendments to facilitate development in Community District 7 Queens. In addition, on September 6th, we have Block 4, Contribution in Kind -66 Hudson Yards. Please note for the record that Commissioners Cerullo and Cantor are recused. Annie White is here to answer any questions you may have. Okay. We can move on to post-hearing follow-ups. We have the Westchester Avenue Bridge Rehabilitation Center. Also, we have Special Harlem River Waterfront Expansion. Staff from the Bronx office are available here to discuss. For Pfizer sites rezoning, Syed Ahmed from the Brooklyn office is available to discuss the applicant's letter you received. This project is for zoning text and map amendments to facilitate construction of mixed-use buildings.
Good evening, Commissioners. We wanted to review some of the issues raised at the City Planning Commission public hearing on July 26th. The questions raised by the Commission were HPD's role in the review of MIH affordable units, the proposed bedroom mix unit in the development, and open space design and its future maintenance. Since the public hearing, we have confirmed HPD's role in the management and marketing of the affordable units. Also in your package, there is a letter from the applicant with responses to your questions and a letter from Community Board 4 in opposition to the proposed application. Regarding HPD's role in the management of MIH units, the applicant cannot receive a building permit until they file an MIH application and obtain a permit notice from HPD. Permit notice requires a recorded restrictive declaration which includes the following items: number of MIH units and bedroom mixes and sizes in the development, AMI levels and rents for those units, and building plans. In addition, the selection of an administering agent. Applicant proposes a not-for-profit administering agent. HPD reviews the qualification of the proposed administering agent, approves the selection, and signs a regulatory agreement with the concerned parties. Finally, after the completion of the MIH application, HPD issues a permit notice to DOD so the applicant can get their building permits. In reference to marketing of affordable units, HPD reviews and approves the marketing plan submitted by the administering agent. The plan includes the following: lottery application process, all advertising and outreach publication in multiple languages, and HPD posts affordable units on their online site, Housing Connect, where people can apply for those affordable units. At the completion of construction, applicant cannot receive TOCs until HPD reviews MIH units to make sure that the units are built according to the plans filed and approved as part of the MIH application. Finally, the bedroom mix in MIH developments is governed by Zoning Resolution Section 2396C. According to the zoning resolution, MIH units shall contain a bedroom mix at least proportional to the bedroom mix of the market rate units. At least 75% of the units contain one or more bedrooms. At least 50% of the units be 2 bedrooms or larger. In your package, there is an applicant's letter which responds to your questions raised at the public hearing. In their letter, the applicant's representative states that the developer, the Rapsky Group, has built approximately 2,000 units of housing in Brooklyn and Queens, of which 1,700 are rental units with a variety of bedroom sizes. The applicant points out that in all of their developments, the unit mix consisted of 60% of studios and one-bedrooms, 16% two-bedrooms, 16% three-bedrooms, and only 8% of the units were 4 and 5 bedrooms. Regarding open space design and maintenance, the applicant points out that they have no intention of subdividing the site. And open space is a required element of the project. Its location, size, and design elements would be memorialized in a restrictive declaration along with the site plans. In addition, the applicant has increased the amount of green space in the landscaping plan as suggested at the public hearing from 903 square feet to 1,460 square feet, an increase of 557 square feet. The new set of drawings in your package show the added green space in light green color. In reference to the maintenance of the open space, the applicant states that it would be the responsibility of the owner or owners association as prescribed in the restrictive declaration. Finally, in your package, there is a letter from Community Board 4 in opposition of the application, raising similar concerns as raised earlier at the public hearing. Any questions? Yes.
Commissioner Delaude.
So are we actually going to be provided with a unit mix prior to voting?
We don't know, but they haven't provided them to us yet.
As Syed said, we don't expect to hear from the commission, from the applicants about the unit mix. Again, what they've said is what they said at the public hearing, which is that they defer to marketing and financing once the zoning has been approved. And as they state in their letter, that they intend to build units for a wider range of applicant seekers, apartment seekers, housing seekers. But we don't have more detail, and even though we and the commission have asked for more detail.
Commissioner Levin.
Well, I guess I recognize and accept that issues of unit mix and location, compliance of the MIH units with the MIH requirements is really the jurisdiction of HPD and not necessarily us. We're simply doing a rezoning. And thank you, Syed, for giving us the additional information about HPD's role. I think that helps us understand more clearly how these issues will be taken care of. But I think we heard a lot of testimony at the public hearing about the need for understanding the unit mix, and what that really goes to is a concern about who it is who's going to be able to live in this development. And I remain concerned. I mean, I think it's our responsibility in a rezoning to ensure that we're facilitating the development of housing to meet wider city needs. As you indicated, for a wider city population. That's our responsibility as commissioners. It's our responsibility under the Fair Housing Act. And I hope our report will make clear that we have taken a hard look at that, done what we can to ensure that this is meeting citywide needs and not the needs of any particular demographic group. That's an important thing for us to, I think, sign off on. This is a little bit different than a case where we're approving a particular development plan. So, I can accept, personally, I can accept a little less clarity, but I hope our report is vividly clear about our citywide responsibility here.
Good.
The report will certainly reflect the commission's questions, concerns. Other questions, comments? Thank you,
Okay.
Syed.
Just a few more items. We also have Albany Neighborhood Senior Center, an acquisition of a building for continued use. You received a letter from DIFTA. Staff is present to answer any questions you may have. Also, 930 Flushing Avenue, an acquisition of a building for use as storage and backup operations by the Office of Emergency Management. At Queens, we have All My Children Daycare Center 6, an acquisition of a building for continued use as a daycare center. And also in Queens, we have Northeastern Towers Annex LP, a zoning text and map amendments to facilitate a new 20-story independent living facility. Please note for the record that Commissioner Delausse is recused. You received follow-up correspondence from the applicant. Stephen Everett is present to answer any questions you might have.
The one thing I would note for the commissioners is that there were a number of follow-up questions on 930 Flushing Avenue, but we thought that we would bring forward and answer those questions when we get more information at our next review session. And unless people really want to stay here later, I'd say that this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience and good humor.
Thanks, guys.
Yay, Hannah.
Well done.